Right, try that again. Good morning, my name is Brene Lloyd, and I'm pleased to be here this morning to moderate this community panel. We're very pleased to be here in the territory of Wabigoon Lake Ojibwe Nation in Treaty 3 territory, and here as a guest of the Dryden Nuclear Education Engagement Committee in the city of Dryden. So our panel is titled 10 Things You Need to Know About Nuclear Waste. I'm going to just skip through these 10 things very quickly because I want to get on to our panel. So the first is high-level radioactive waste is produced in nuclear power stations. There is a potential for the waste categories to expand beyond the current suite of reactors, but the 2005 plan from the Nuclear Waste Management Organization, which is the plan of record, or the proposal of record, is based on the reactor waste. The NWMO is comprised of those nuclear power generators, those nuclear waste owners. In 2005, they released their adaptive phased management plan. And the end point of that plan is to bury the nuclear waste deep in a rock formation. And as you've heard, they're looking at two different rock formations, one here in Treaty 3 territory, the Revel Lake, in the Revel Lake area. There's no approved deep geological repository anywhere in the world. We just heard from Pasivia that they filed an application the very end of December, but there is no operating deep geological repository. Sweden filed their operating application in 2011, and they've been through many iterations with their regulator, and they still don't have an operating license. The NWMO has said they'll only proceed with an informed and willing host. Prior to releasing their siting plan, they did hold a couple of forums, and they were given, I think, pretty good advice that they should define both community and that measure of willingness before launching their siting process. But regrettably, they didn't take that advice, and we now have a situation where a township 45 kilometers upstream from the site is designated as one of the two potential host communities. Wabigoon Lake Ojibwe Nation identified as also being a community with authority over whether this project goes ahead. But the Township of Ignace has now said that Township Council will make that determination of willingness on behalf. So potentially 3 people in Ignace could make this decision. The NWMO has, while they've been somewhat ambiguous about how they will measure willingness, they have said, with respect specifically to Ignace, that it will be the people, the residents of Ignace, who will make that decision. But the Township of Ignace, at least as of December, appeared to be on a different course. The NWMO includes in their siting process the option of adding what they call a shallow cavern or a temporary storage or a interim storage. And we heard a lot yesterday, Dr. Ottenmeyer's enthusiasm for reprocessing. It's been a concern of many that this option of shallow storage could be a midpoint between transport to the site, availability for reprocessing, which in experience to date is a highly contaminating process using the Purex system, highly contaminating process which increases the volume of waste and increases the challenges in dealing with that waste. NWMO says they don't intend to use that shallow cavern option, but it's still in their documents and they have not removed it from their plan of record, the 2005 Adaptive Phase Management. The proposed transportation scheme will include 2 to 3 shipments, road shipments per day for an estimated 50 years. There's many issues associated with this, not just the greenhouse gas emissions from transporting those very, very long distances from the reactor stations to the site, but also all of the risks associated with radioactive releases during that transportation, whether through normal operations or through accident conditions. The NWMO will transfer the waste from their current plan. Currently, the plan is to transfer the waste, put it in one transportation container at the station. There's no information released about that. NWMO says that's up to the waste owners, the waste generators, who are their members. Then they'll transfer it into a transportation container, move it to the site, and then transfer it again into there. The current proposal is for a copper container of, and that repackaging facility, we are in the last 18 months hearing some more information about that facility, but it's still largely at the theoretical or the concept level. But the work will be technically difficult, and it'll be hazardous to workers, and it will include releases to air and to the surface ponds, which will receive the collected contaminated water. The proximity principle is a principle that's at play in other jurisdictions, and that principle directs that radioactive waste should be managed as close to the point of generation as possible. And that is the principle that in our very measured consideration is the approach that should be at play in Canada as well, and certainly in Ontario. And there is a viable alternative to the transportation and burial of high-level radioactive waste. It's not status quo management at the reactor stations. Despite being a Northern Ontario organization and not having reactors in our regions, we have looked closely at waste management at the reactor station because that was the source of the waste, and we have identified a number of deficiencies there. It's not status quo management. It's moving the waste at site into more secure, more robust, medium to long-term, extended, the international language is extended on-site storage. It might not be the solution into perpetuity, but certainly for the next 50 to 100 to 300 years tends to be the common time frame in the international discussion. And that allows, it would take the pressure off our communities to accept projects that are not yet defined, that are not yet designed, that have a long list of uncertainties associated with them. And for the reactor communities, it would mean that the waste was moved sooner into a more secure management system rather than much later if that waste was to be left to be transported to some other location, have the waste go away. So that was the short-term version, and just really is the preface to our community panel, and I'm really pleased to introduce James Croker as our first speaker, and James is going to give an overview much more specific to the situation here in Treaty 3 territory. James.
Thank you, Brene, and thank you for the opportunity. I really appreciate it. I grew up a Craker, and I think I've become a Croker. It's kind of the way names go. Anyway, Kate, my wife, and I are residents of Dryden. We have 2 children, 4 grandchildren that live in the area, so we care. We really care. There's a few things. I'm not really that good off the cuff, but there's a few things, and that's what these events are for us to do some reflection, to think about things. And there's a few things off the cuff that I'd like to say. Number one, we are frequently referred to as the opposition. It just seems to have some connotations to it, the opposition. Really what we are engaged with is to to engage the community in a discussion that yesterday, Carrie from Environmental Law said it's very important to recognize, am I doing something wrong here? It's very important to recognize.
You can stand closer to the mic. We're having a hard time with your audio.
Okay, where the voice is coming from, and she mentioned that a lot of the information is coming from the nuclear producers. So it's very important. Really, when we're engaging with the community, and I'm a part of two groups, Sunset Country Spirit Alliance local groups, and No Nuclear Waste in Northwestern Ontario. But we're also involved with Brenane at Northwatch, and we want to be very careful when we present publicly that we are not misleading and that what we're saying is true. And I know Chief Wadalanian, and I'm glad you're here from Wabigoon Lake Ojibwe Nation, has corrected me a couple times in dialogue that something may be misleading. And we had another conversation yesterday about something regarding Japan. I'll get to that. And I agreed with them. Some of the things that we're saying could be construed as misleading. We do not want to mislead. Brenane helps us a lot to make sure that what we're presenting to the public is true and not misleading. So So the Nuclear Waste Management Organization plans to transport high-level nuclear waste into the area here. We know that. We've heard lots about that. Brenane talked about that. I won't go beyond that. We know that it's that NWMO is comprised, and that goes to where's the voice coming from. We know that NWMO is comprised of nuclear generation, and it raises the question of the information that we're getting is coming, a lot of it's coming from a vested interest. And yesterday, that's what we were warned of. You know what? Which button do I choose to go to the next one? What? Okay, thank you. I'm challenged in a lot of ways, not only with technical things, huh? So one thing that's obvious, but I just want to go through this a little bit. Nuclear waste, high-level nuclear waste is extremely dangerous. How dangerous is it? Well, just to give you a few facts on it, it's 1 million times more dangerous than the original uranium. Some isotopes remain radioactive for over 1 million years, some a lot less. And even low-level exposure can be harmful. And you can see Dr. Edwards' claim on this slide. And basically what he's saying is exposure to radioactivity can contaminate our food chain, our water, and our air. So nuclear waste storage, the header is it's unproven, controversial. And I just want to mention that Germany, not all countries are in favor of nuclear energy. Germany has had a very bad experience with storage of nuclear waste. It has, for them, as far as national policy goes, they are getting out, they're hoping to. This Russian conflict has kind of, who knows what's going to happen, but they're projecting to get out by the end of 2022 of nuclear energy. Their failure at their storage facility is estimated to cost $5 billion, and that it will take 30 years to clean up. And I think we need to remember that our government, us, are going to be on the hook if we have a failure over here. This is a much more complicated system than what they have in Germany. And any cleanup cost, if there's dislocate or relocation or anything like that needed, could cost an awful lot of money. I just want you to know that us as taxpayers are the ones that are on the hook for this. And this repository storage, we heard from Finland, they're doing very interesting things. I have a lot of respect for Finland because they have very good, I've known from forestry because I've worked with them, they have very good national policy, but that does not make what they're doing proven. So I'm saying that the proposed deep repository storage is unproven, risky, and extremely dangerous. Now, I don't want to spend a lot of time like that on this, but I just want to show, and we all know on the map, the localized water. And Brenain said it, Ignis is upstream. Wabigoon Lake Ojibwe Nation is downstream, and they have every right to be a very, very big voice in what's going on. They're close, and they're downstream from the from the water flows. Now, if you go to the bigger map and the more general water flows, what we take out of this is that this location that has been chosen affects two major water flows. One is through the Turtle River, which goes to Lake of the Woods and affects international waters. And the other one is through the Wabigoon River and Lake and into the English River water flow. Now, a lot of people, a lot of independent scientists and think tanks have said that water infiltration is a very, very big risk with this project. In fact, some have said that it's the most dangerous and irreversible risk gets into the water. It's people that know more than me, a lot more, I don't know how much. The presence, we do a lot of reading and we do a lot of research, and I've worked together with 3 others. We work 2 months getting together every few weeks. We don't just pick up a hitchhiker and go with the flow. We are going to scientific sources and getting the information. Anyway, it is potentially a big risk. Now, I would think that this site should be abandoned immediately. When I go I go fishing to areas very close to the site, and sometimes I'm very annoyed because beavers have put up dams and there's water and I can't get through, and thank God for 4-wheel drive. Anyway, there's water everywhere. We know that. Anybody around here knows that. Having a site with so much fresh water is dangerous and extremely dangerous. I don't know why they're considering that site on that point at all. Shortcuts cannot be tolerated. I'm going to skip this slide because Brenain already made the point of shallow storage. And go on to the next slide. And this one is flawed process of consent and lack of independent scrutiny. Now, yesterday when Carrie was speaking to the group, was on the panel with a lot of different inputs, but Carrie from Environmental Law did not touch on it very much, but one of her colleagues, Teresa McLaughlin, is that right? McClenahan, sorry, did at another event, talked about the need for independent scrutiny with this. And another thing, I have said that Wabigoon Lake Ojibwe Nation has every right and is probably trumps a lot of other people's reason to be at the table, but Dryden should not be excluded. Dryden should absolutely not. They're claiming they're the ones that provide services. We're going to hear more later from June about services, so I won't go too far into that. But the catchment area that Dryden claims, City of Dryden claims, is 25,300 and some. That's made up of tourist operators and all kinds of different interests, small communities. They come to Dryden. Dryden should have a major voice at the table already about hosting the site in this area. And I know it's the election coming up, and I know there's a lot of candidates that come here. I'm really happy that they are here. But I would hope that they would find a way to influence, to do everything they can to have a bigger seat at the table. They deserve it. Okay, now we go on to transportation. And, you know, this is the first time I didn't pay attention to this right away, the whole repository thing. But the first time, I think it was a Rotary meeting, there was a presentation by NWMO, and all of a sudden they said, what, New Brunswick? It's coming all the way from New Brunswick? What? And that's where my interest first, where I developed a lot of interest, and it didn't make any sense to me, knowing that everything that the main generation is in southern Ontario, 1,700 kilometers away, and coming all the way from New Brunswick. Didn't make any sense. And I will just make the note, it's on the slide there, that Sweden and Finland are both in stages of development with DGRs. It seems to be the flavor of the day. But both of those, and the Finnish representative talked about a little bit, that both of those sites are immediately beside a generator site. And the other thing about transportation, I mean, I would like to know more about, there's so much medically about radiation. If there's, I know if I get an x-ray or something, it's localized to one spot, and they kind of recommend you don't get a bunch in a row or something like that. But when there's constant exposure on truck routes and transportation routes, there's considerable evidence that that radioactivity can kind of accumulate and cause effects. It can even accumulate and make the next generation more susceptible to radiation. And the more you look at that, again, I'm not an expert. I've been working with Canadian Association of Physicians. I did a presentation to them locally, and I did a presentation to them nationally because they had an interest. They asked me to. We're now working with a doctor from Cape, and I really think that the potential medical effects, to know more about that is extremely important. Maybe this isn't an issue. I don't know, but we need to know. All the people along the route need to know. So, you know, I think I need to go a little faster for other people's time. I'll skip this one. Challenges related to handling and repackaging, because Brene already covered that. I don't want to bore you with repetition. And I want to go on to there's no long-term proof of the stability of copper. We've talked a little bit. In Sweden, they did a test, a simple test. The test was this. They put copper into a jar of water, one sealed. They did two, one sealed, one unsealed. The one unsealed showed already corrosion in copper after 15 years. And that really alarmed people in Sweden. Big topic. Now, I went to Best Western at a presentation of NWMO. They brought their expert on encapsulation. I was very interested in that. I had questions about it. I didn't know much about it, but I did know about this. So I asked the expert, I said, well, you must be aware. You must be aware of what happened in Sweden. Yes, I was. I said, well, how do you feel about that? And he said, wow, it's a 15-year study. It's never been replicated. And it didn't occur to me right away. But over time, I have thought about this, and I said, really, all of the stuff that NWMO, no, I won't say all, that may be a misstatement, but much of the stuff that NWMO is presenting to you, to the communities, surrounding area. Much of this stuff is not proven. It's not replicated. So they're telling me it has to be a replication for them to pay attention, yet they're going to our community and saying, I want you to approve this on just a hypothetical plan that doesn't have to be proven. I don't think about it. Anyway, that's my take on it. Anyway, the other thing is the copper coating is not very thick over here. In Sweden and Finland, it's much thicker. And one other thing I will say, that I've seen a claim by NWMO that the copper will protect for, I think, 7 million years, a really long period of time. Sweden saying it might be hundreds of years, so who are we to believe? I don't know. Now, I also wanted to, am I on the right one here? Oh, that was the slide I just went through. Okay, I'll go on to respected leaders. And there's four leaders that had high level positions with nuclear waste, with government programs in France, United Kingdom, USA, and Germany. And they came together and made a joint statement. These are people that are accredited, they're experts, they've been involved in the field, and they highlighted the extreme risk and danger of nuclear power and nuclear waste. They thought it was important enough, even though they had worked at high levels within the industry overseas and in the USA, they got together and thought it was important enough to issue a statement, a public statement, about the extreme risk and danger of nuclear power. Now, you know what? Former prime ministers of Japan. I just had a discussion yesterday with Chief Wadalainen, and the claims about Japan are saying 5 former prime ministers got together. Basically what they're saying, we were told that nuclear power was safe. Where do you think they got that information from? We were told that, and we believed that, and we were wrong. They also cite that nuclear waste is an unsolvable problem. But Chief, that could be misleading. Chief Wadalainen, rightfully so, said to me, Japan's a much different country than Canada is. And their terrain is different, their options are different. So I take that point. Japan has a different, in the sense of high-level nuclear waste and repository, it's different. Thank you for that. Okay, conclusions. Get to the end. Many independent scientists and think tanks agree that high-level nuclear waste disposal is dangerous and current plans are experimental. So, if not here, where? Well, Brene went through that. I'm not going to go over it again. They're saying, fortify it where it is. Give us time to be able to come to a solution that is more proven and not as risky. So, as a concluding comment, it's nuclear waste, high-level nuclear waste, dangerous and unproven experiment. Dangers of deep repository burial of nuclear waste have not been communicated to the public. And that is just saying that with NWMO, they are putting their case forward, and it's interesting. I've followed it. I've talked to lots of them. But I've also often asked the question, what are the dangers? And they kind of skirt that. Again, where's the voice coming from? Deep burial is essentially experimental and lacks scientific evidence of safety. There's nobody even doing it yet, let alone having a track record for us to look at. It's inconceivable that no accidents will occur over the 45 years. Sometimes it could be more, it could be less, probably more. Anyway, it's inconceivable there will be no accidents in hauling, handling, and repackaging. Radioactivity is so terribly dangerous. We better know for sure. And if we're wrong, the associated risks to water, air, and food chain contaminations scares the heck out of me. So I ask the question, what future will we pass on to our children, grandchildren, and future generations? And thank you again so much for giving me the opportunity to present over there today. I hope that each one of you, we're here. I don't disrespect somebody for thinking differently than myself. I'm here to help to inform the public. And I hope you do your own research. And if you come up to a different conclusion than I do, that's fine. Important thing is for an informed decision, we need to be informed. Thank you.
Very much, James. And we need James card.
Thank you. Good morning. Welcome, everybody. It's good to be here. My name is June Kellaway-Tarrant, and I'm with No Nuclear Waste in Northwestern Ontario. Thank you. I'm sure it's no surprise to you that the implementation of the Nuclear Waste Management Organization's plan will bring significant changes and impacts to Dryden and our area. And some of those will be great. Some of them will be really beneficial. Some will be adverse, some manageable, some unavoidable, some irrevocable, and some unpredictable. So I'm going to share with you this morning my thoughts in regards to the economic, social, and cultural impacts for Dryden. The mining industry has had a long track record related to boom and bust. And I believe that the project being proposed here will have the same kind of boom and bust impacts to Dryden that have been experienced by mining towns. There are basically 3 phases to the project that's being proposed. And Joel last night talked about we're in the siting phase or the planning phase, construction phase, and then operations phase. And most of the jobs where we'll see the economy maybe have a boost will be during the construction phase and later in the operations phase. I ask you to consider this. Dryden will experience uneven impacts with the rise and the fall in the number of workers. So if you think about construction, during the construction phase, there will be times when there's going to be a need for 600 or 700 workers, and times when there's going to be a need for maybe 50 workers. And the same thing applies as it goes from one phase to the next. And based on the numbers that we've been provided by NWMO, the current phase has about 50 people or 50 jobs, and that's spread across the area, not just here in Dryden. And that will climb to almost 1,300 jobs during construction. And once operations have been completed, that will drop down to 290 jobs. So you can see there's fluctuation throughout the whole project, and really huge increase and then a big boom at the end of it. We can expect when that happens that land and property values will be impacted. rising with the influx of the workers that are coming into town and falling when the demand decreases. With the construction spike, an investment in infrastructure will be required to meet the increased demand for services. And Dryden will be faced with financially supporting the increases in infrastructure and maintaining the overbuilt infrastructure. It's important to remember that the infrastructure at the site of the DGR will not provide a tax base to Dryden. It's not in Dryden, so the services that will be needed in Dryden, the residents will be left to deal with that. The city will see an influx of outside workers because of the broad range of skills that will be required, not available here in Dryden, not available perhaps in the area, as well as the number of jobs that will be available. We need to recognize as well that some of the skilled and high-paying jobs may not be available to local people due to union agreements that will be in place with contractors or because of the experience and the skills that are required to perform the job aren't available here. I expect as well that many of those workers that are coming in for these jobs will make greater wages than what's currently or will be the norm in Dryden. Accommodations during construction, I suspect that a lot of that will be on-site camps or nearby so that workers are in close proximity to the job. And camp workers are often a few weeks on and a few weeks off. So a few weeks at work and then a few weeks to go home. I've personally observed workers in Newfoundland that go to Alberta. And they work 3 weeks, 4 weeks on, and then they go home for the same amount of time, where they spend their money. So I suspect many of the construction workers will also bring their money home. It won't be left in Dryden. Next slide. So worker influx will create erratic needs for Dryden. Again, I ask you to consider this. Dryden will experience a strain on the infrastructure and finances. So the essential services such as health, education, housing, childcare will need to be expanded in order to deal with the worker influx, particularly during construction. And again, some of that is going to be anticipatory planning because we won't really know for sure how many people will be coming, will need what kinds of services and supports. And we won't know that until it happens, and hopefully the right decisions will be made. So Dryden will have to become good at adjusting and realigning services based on the changing demands and needs. So, the change in terms of the numbers and the changes in terms of whether or not individuals are coming or families are coming. And they'll have to make those adjustments as we have the rises and the falls. I've heard over recent months people suggesting that this project will keep our children and our grandchildren home. As was said in the beginning, I've worked across the north for a number of years, and the reality in northern Ontario is that we have an aging population, and our young people are leaving the north for larger cities and for all the things that larger cities have to offer. So I think it's a false expectation to think that we're going to keep our young people here, or young people of the future. I also would question whether or not our young people will really want to raise children and a family and live near a high-level nuclear waste site in the Dryden area. So next, this slide is about impact to vulnerable segment of our community, our social impacts. We often forget about those kinds of impacts. I believe that a boom may provide great economic opportunities for some, but that it will place others in vulnerable positions. I think of our seniors and individuals with fixed incomes. They'll be faced with increased costs. We know right now with the current economy that it's extremely challenging for many people. And this would likely become more widespread as this project starts to unwind. Also, the city, individuals, and businesses will likely increase debt load during construction to keep up with demand or to open new businesses. And at the end of the day, many of them who have taken that risk may be left with debt. I expect that many of you are also familiar with booms and busts communities, and that they have often experienced increases in crime, domestic violence, and substance abuse. We also will have a large number of transient workers that will be coming. And these transient workers are not committed to our town, but they certainly will be here to use our services and our supports. They won't be staying, they won't have plans to stay. And as a result, they won't contribute back into our communities. They won't be part of our helping community or our volunteers that are providing support and services in town. They'll be here to use our services. So just some general community impacts. Again, I ask you to consider this. The employment opportunities, particularly during construction, will likely attract single transient workers, and with it, the associated alcohol, drug, and social issues. And I wouldn't doubt that it'll be likely that our police will be busy. I note that some of our municipal candidates included substance abuse and homelessness as concerns and priorities in their current platforms, suggesting that we already know that our community has challenges and struggles in those areas. Another huge concern is access to medical doctors and professional staff, and I think we can't underestimate that. As you know, Dryden currently has challenges recruiting and retaining doctors and all other professional staff. And I wonder if a nuclear waste site in our vicinity would further impede our ability to attract and retain efforts, our attraction and retention efforts, pardon me. We also know right now it's challenging at times to be able to access our medical care. And with influx in workers, I suspect that we won't see improvement in that area. And again, I note that municipal candidates have expressed concern with the current access to health care in Dryden. So again, it's an issue that people are aware of. As James said earlier as well, the taxpayers of Dryden will be on the hook for all the costs that are related to general infrastructure demands. So more people using our services and supports will require more maintenance, etc. And of course, if there's an overbuild, those infrastructure costs as well. Yes. So the next piece is on culture and irreversible change to Dryden's culture. And again, I ask you to consider this. The plan to have nuclear waste near our community is contentious and causing divisiveness in our community and between communities. And this is not what we want. This is not good for us. It's not healthy for us in terms of moving forward. And we're going to need to figure that out together, how we move forward. Also, I would say a lack of confidence and trust in community leaders is perceived by some based on the decisions being made for short-term economic gain. I want to say thank you and applaud those candidates that have put their name up in the municipal election coming up. And I know that this is a really challenging time, so thank you for doing that. Added to this feeling is a sense of lack of control and a lack of voice in communities' decision and directions for the future. Also, I would say that concern that our community values, things that are important to us, things that we like about our area and why we're here. So people feel that they may lose that. There's a risk that the plan potentially is not a good fit with our community. So basically a change to the community and the environment that we know and we love. I'd ask you to consider this. Sunset Country will be forever changed. Remember the identity of Dryden back in the 70s and 80s, that we were the stinky community? I mean, I traveled across the north. As soon as I said I was from Dryden, the first thing that people commented on was the odor, et cetera, in our town. And we've overcome that, but a new negative stigma will likely emerge with the creation of a nuclear waste facility in our area. So I ask us all to consider the sacrifices that we will make for short-term economic gain. I ask us all to consider the impacts to our children and our grandchildren and future generations they will be faced with based on the decisions that we will make. In the short term, jobs and income may be seen as beneficial, but in the long term, community, culture, values, and priorities that we embrace today will be in jeopardy. I am reminded of a saying that a Canadian writer and storyteller, Stuart McLean, frequently said, and many of you will know he was here in Dryden many times. And Stuart said, "We may not be big, but we're small." And I really believe that that simple slogan exemplifies the essence of our small city and our values. Thank you so much.
Cliff Long. Cliff is the owner-operator of Cobblestone Lodge and is going to share with us some of the concerns and the perspectives and what he's hearing from his counterparts in the tourism sector. Thank you, Cliff.
Thank you very much. I don't have a lot of visual aids. I need you to hear what I have to say. As this committee, my name is Clifford Long. I'm a proud owner, and I lived here in the Ignis area as well as at the camp for 36 years. First, I'd like to thank all of you for the opportunity not only to voice my concerns, but most of the concerns of tourist camps as well as businesses related to the tourist industry, along with local businesses here in Northwest Ontario. I might not know a lot about nuclear waste. I do know a lot about tourism here in Northwest Ontario. My camp, Cobblestone Lodge, is located on Rowley Lake, which flows into Rowley Falls, which is known to many who travel Highway 17. By the way, this is the same highway this nuclear waste is going to be traveled on also. Or know someone in the timber industry with the same name, Rowley Falls Timber, which is also, by the way, as well as tourism, a renewable resource. Both Rowley Lake and Revel Lake are the beginnings of the Wabigoon River system. A lot of people that live here for years don't know this. This river runs through many communities, including the town of Wabigoon, as well as the very town in which I'm speaking today, and flow north. I guess one could say the water connects us all. These waters are the lifeblood of the tourist industry. I'd like to bring to your attention tourist camps in this area have a number of lakes, boat caches. These boat caches are very important to the tourist industry. Two of my boat caches are actually on Revel Lake, which is close to this proposed site. These boats are used daily. It's only 15 minutes from my camp. I would like to also point out this proposed site has been referred to as the Revel Lake site. If this project is approved, everyone in the world will identify this as the Revel Nuclear Waste facility in Northwest Ontario, Canada. Those are the words they're going to be using. What will happen when people go online for information on Revel Lake or Northwest Ontario and find out this remote lake is identified along with the nuclear waste site? I ask, how in the world are we supposed to just say it's okay to fish here? They told me it was safe. How am I supposed to tell this once beautiful spring-fed waterfall from Raleigh Lake, along with the Revel River, which feeds most of Ontario, but it's okay, they said it was safe? How am I or anyone in the future going to reply, it's okay, they said it was safe? You might ask, what is tourism here in Northwest Ontario? We don't have endless supply of white sand beaches. We don't have theme parks. We don't have endless sunny days, obviously. If you think only a few tourist camps would be affected, go online. Punch in Sunset Country or Patricia Region. These are the camps. This is who I speak for right now. They only represent, the ones that are in these books only represent 2/3 of the tourist camps. I suggest you read their ads, see what they already bring to Northwest Ontario, and ask local business how important we are. What the tourist industry here offers is a chance to enjoy clean lakes, vast wilderness, and an opportunity to enjoy some of the best fishing in Canada that Canada has to offer. Most of the people visit Northwest Ontario are from the U.S. fishing. Although right now my camp is full of Thunder Bay, Dryden, and Winnipeg people, everyone asking the same question, are the trout up? By the way, they are up. For years, we've attended sport shows in the U.S. along with very elaborate websites, but most of all, all of us rely on word of mouth and repeat customers. This customer base has taken years to establish. Unfortunately, due to the pandemic, closures of the border, we've lost 2 years of income. Some camps were forced to close permanently. Some will take years to get to pre-pandemic levels again. With the closures of the borders and mandates, which are only being lifted now, all tourist camps have got a glimpse of what it's like without numbers of tourists visiting this region. I can tell you it's very frightening. Excuse me. No, I'm fine. Years ago, I was given 15 minutes to speak in order just to protect the shoreline of the lake that my camp's on Raleigh Lake, from over-harvest of trees. I believe we needed to show future generations the beauty of our lakes. Thankfully, this area is now known as Raleigh Lake Viewscape Reserve. Then as well as now, I felt the need to stand up and protect this for the future of Northwest Ontario. All we have are the waters. Excellent fishing, wilderness experience that thousands of visitors who visit here, this area, look forward to every year. Many tourists come here to enjoy something which may no longer exist where they live. This sometimes is a feeling of excitement, a place to go, relax, a place to have memories in a simpler time, and a chance to reflect on nature in its true form. As a tourist operator, I cannot promote beautiful wilderness, clean waters, excellent fishing and hunting, and in the heart of this, a nuclear waste site. Mark my words, no matter how safe or not, there will be a stigma attached to Northwest Ontario. This stigma will affect this region for years to come. For example, when we were looking for purchase a resort, we avoided areas due to a so-called mercury contamination just from this very area. This stigma will remain and not only affect property values of tourist camps, but the property values of all who live here. It's already begun with the presence of the no nuclear signs and storefronts in our towns promoting this project. Tourists are asking questions, not about how are the fish biting, but nuclear waste. Waste in any shape, form, above ground or below it, is still waste. Let me remind all of you, we were led to believe that asbestos was a good thing too. I'm sure back then they thought it was safe also. Once this is done, it's done. There's no turning back. What we have here is to be enjoyed, not buried for hundreds of years. Years ago, we lost our spring bear season due to special interest groups and lots of money and political power. With no consultation or studies with tourist outfitters' involvement, just show a small bear clinging to a tree with the words, "A hunter shot his mother." It's that simple. There are camps with bear management areas, including mine, near and around this proposed site. Are they supposed to give up area? How much area will be buffered off due to construction? Will there be no hunting signs, no trespassing signs? Also, there will be as much as 57,000 tons of nuclear waste coming here. Will they start transporting and storing this temporarily above ground? How much land will that take? As you know, most of our rules and regulations come from Southern Ontario. As a result of overharvest, easy access, too many people. This is not the case here in Northwest Ontario. We're not overpopulated. We have lots of water. And the tourist camps do protect their lakes. This is more important than any government regulation. This is our life. Some of you might think, no tourists, well, there'll be more fish and game for us. They don't hunt bears anyway around here. Would you visit or spend your money or take your family to a region where nuclear waste is being stored? These are questions tourists will be asking. Even more important, do you want to live there yourselves? Tourist outfitters are limited to 4 months a year to make a living. We've got 8 months to think about preparing for the next season. Right now, I should be thinking about a leaky faucet in one of my cabins. I'm sure if you're not being paid, I emphasize the word paid to be here, I bet you could find something else better to do. I stand here before you today because this is something that will affect tourism and all of us in Northwest Ontario for many years to come. Our job, as well as yours, is to protect and preserve for future generations. Don't let the thought of big money and promises turn Northwest Ontario into just a highway to get from Thunder Bay to Manitoba. Thank you.
Thanks, Cliff, and everybody. Are you guys okay to take some questions now, or do you have anything else to say? Okay. Was there any online?
Just going to pass the mic around here. Please put up your hand if you have a question.
Good morning, everyone. In case we have a slightly different audience today, I wanted to introduce myself. I'm Nancy Greencorn, and I'm from the Canadian Nuclear Safety Commission. And I just wanted to share a little bit of what our roles and responsibilities are. One is to disseminate scientific information. So our goal is to be an open and transparent regulator. So we do our own independent research. Some of us would very much appreciate talking about the research they do on an everyday basis and the international collaboration. So if you have information, you have questions on or what's happening internationally, or how will the project, if it was submitted, be reviewed, we are very happy to share any information to you on that. We have an info account. Another one of our responsibilities is to do rigorous reviews of any documentation that's submitted as part of an application. So before a project would proceed, there is extensive reviews done on this, and it is our role to ensure safety by reviewing those documents. And I just want to take 1 minute to pass the mic to my colleague, just to give an indication about the steps that would be taken if an application was received, and how it would be reviewed by both the Canadian Nuclear Safety Commission as well as our impact assessment.
Sure, thanks. So Connor Anderson from the Impact Assessment Agency of Canada, project manager. I just want to thank the panelists for voicing their concerns this morning, and note that there is an impact assessment, an integrated assessment process that would occur for this project should a proposal be put forward by the NWMO and submitted formally to us. And concerns around social services, impacts to health conditions, social conditions, economic conditions, those would be considered as part of the impact process, assessment process. And so we would expect that there would be public hearings likely to occur, as we noted yesterday, in the communities that are most likely to be impacted by the project. So I'm not on the team that organizes those hearings, but I anticipate that the City of Dryden would likely play host to a public hearing. And there is participant funding available, so concerns such as those that we've heard today could be brought forward to the independent review panel, and concerns could be therefore addressed through the impact assessment process, and mitigation measures put forward, et cetera. Very, very key concerns, and heard clearly, and many valid, and so those could certainly inform an impact assessment process once that is underway. So thanks.
I'm sorry, Nancy and Connor, I didn't hear your question.
We didn't have a question.
Okay,
we just
thank you.
were
Thank you.
concerned
Thank
that some people hadn't heard about what our roles were yesterday, because it was a slightly different audience
So no
today.
questions?
Yes.
Thanks. Maybe we could move on to questions.
Okay, I'm coming over there. I'll be right there.
No problem.
Having heard of these town of Ignis, where the decisions are being made by the council, and some reluctance toward referenda, my question is directed as to the city of Dryden and the process that has taken place to this point. And I really appreciate the opportunity to be here in a public forum and listen to different opinions. But my question is, will this be directed to a public referendum rather than those who are in city council? Personally, I think it is important that those people who are affected by whatever happens should be the people who decide as to the location of this. And as a follow-up to the gentleman from Finland, I did a little research, and I recognized that the 4 sites that were chosen or were looked at were sites that had the ability to store the waste. However, after having gone through the exercise, they recognized that it would make better sense from the standpoint of transportation, as well as the protection of the nuclear facility closer, to deal with those problems. My recommendation would be to look at the international decisions that are made and recognize these people have experience, they're highly intelligent, they're working on good information, scientific, but also taking into consideration public response. My understanding was that the site chosen in Finland had both of those things taken into consideration. Thank you.
Can I just respond to that then? not sure that that was exactly a question, but I'm glad that you brought up, because there's municipal elections going on. And I had put in a submission to the engagement committee to seek a platform for us to organize something to give a broader understanding to the community of what's all involved. Not just a learning event, a learning plus event, I guess I'll call it. And there is a motion on the table, I think, that got tabled at the last Dryden, City of Dryden meeting with the lame duck, I guess I'll call it a lame duck council, that said that they wanted to disband the committee immediately after this event, which would have made it impossible for us to organize an event that could give more understanding to the broader community. So thank you for all the people that are here from our municipal representatives and also the candidates, and I would be very happy to discuss this more with anyone that has an interest. Thanks.
I think it's an excellent question, and I think this is an excellent time to be asking the question during the municipal election. How will Dryden represent the will of the community in how it positions itself relative to this project? NWMO has not identified Dryden as a potential host community, but I think that the same principles should be at play here, which is that the council represents the people. The NWMO some years ago went on record saying that a municipality, that it would be the residents who would decide, not mayor and council. I've already mentioned that that's shifted in Ignace. And the other host community, potential host community, South Bruce, the municipal council made a commitment to a referendum, but not until after the election, the upcoming election. So I think it's an excellent question, and I think now is the time to put that question to your candidates for mayor and council. As James has mentioned, it seems that there might be some dissolution of the Dryden Nuclear Education and Engagement Committee, as per the motion tabled at the last council meeting. There is another entity, a working group that the City of Dryden has representatives on, but that is not a transparent committee. There is actually a confidentiality provision in that memorandum of understanding, which I think is also very problematic for the people of Dryden, that there is a working group or a committee. I've lost the exact title of that committee, but the record of those meetings and even the ability to sit in on those meetings, they're simply not available to the people of Dryden, and I think that's very problematic. So now's the time really to raise this in the municipal election and ensure that the next council is accountable, is prepared to make that commitment to be accountable to the people of Dryden.
This is Mike Live. Can I make a comment? People aren't aware of this, that we're only about 20 minutes from Ignace Drive, we'll say the way the drive is. This proposed site, which I'm very familiar with, it's like I mentioned earlier, it's in my Bear area. It's only another 20 minutes drive, one way or the other. In some cases, depending how fast you drive, and everybody knows how the Highway 17 is. I think it's a false pretense that Ignace is going to benefit on top of everybody. Ignace does not have the infrastructure. They don't have the people. We used to have 3 grocery stores 36 years ago. Now we've got one that's got 3 aisles, and that's it. Many businesses are closing, as well as they are here in Dryden. But 20 minutes, if you're going to bring your family here and make good money and work for a community on a project like this, you're not going to live in Ignace. You're going to live in areas where there's a town like Dryden. Dryden should be just as important as any town. Ignace should have never had this, and quite honestly, in my opinion, I believe all of Northwest Ontario, from Thunder Bay all the way to the Manitoba border, should have a say-so in this. This is going to put, as I said earlier, a stigma on this area. If you want to be known, it's not the paper mill country, or part of the country where all the paper and the timber industry thrives and does well, and you just want to be known as nuclear waste sites, that's what it is. And it won't come down to Dryden, it won't come down to Ignis, it'll come down to Northwest Ontario. Okay, sorry.
Just a quick comment. People can drop by our booth and pick up our card, which shows our website. And this is election time, so I'm going to suggest to people it's a really good time to engage in conversations with the candidates. And just a heads up that we have posted on our website some questions that we asked each of the candidates, and it might be interesting for you to have a look at the responses that we have received. We did this because we really felt that it was important that community members be informed around what people see as being the priorities and what their plans would be in terms of moving forward. And so I invite you to pick up our card, become familiar with our website, and look at what some of the feedback that we received.
We have one last question, and then we'll move on.
One last question, and then we will continue on, in the interest of time.
Thank you. I'm Peter Ottensmeyer from the University of Toronto. You heard me speak yesterday. June Calloway's Tale of Woe sort of struck a chord because in a sense, I worry about grandchildren as well. And I happen to have relatives in Dryden, and their kids and grandkids are now in Toronto and near Vancouver and so forth. So I understand that. So in my coming up here to talk, I asked myself, what can I offer Dryden that's positive? Because I'm aware of the boom and bust cycle, for instance, even in Pickering. Pickering used to be a thriving community in the 1800s of 10,000, and then it was a shipbuilding community and was living off transportation because it was on the route from Kingston to Toronto, and people stopped there. So it was an excellent community. But then the timber ran out, and CN Railway put a railway through. Nobody stopped to Pickering anymore. It went down to 2,000 and stayed there until it had OPG come and build a reactor. And within 10 years, it went from 2,000 to 60,000 people, and now it's 130,000. They're about to lose their reactors. I bet you it'll go down again. So when I came up here, I said, will you get away from the boom and bust of a deep geological repository, or can we offer something more permanent? And my solution that I presented was to have a reactor, and if you want to, because you're so courageous even to have considered nuclear waste up here, take that nuclear waste and make it into something positive. But at least have the energy from the reactor in the region, because energy is what determines your standard of living. So I would say, if you don't want to do that, is your intention to have nothing happen here in Dryden at all?
I'm going to speak to Dr. Ottensmeyer's question, and I would say that his proposal to add a reactor to the NWMO's deep geological repository is in the extreme of adaptivity. I think it is a concern, and I think one of the real concerns with this project is that it is conceptual, it's in flux, it's adaptive. A concern that we have with the EA process, the impact assessment, no longer an environmental assessment, an impact assessment, is that it comes at the beginning and then there's several licensing stages. So the impact assessment process is, while the project could still be very much in flux. The concern we have with the licensing process the Canadian Nuclear Safety Commission manages is that there can be large amendments to the license as it goes through that process. So For example, the NWMO could put in a proposal for the impact assessment process, which does not include the shallow cavern, which does not include reprocessing or recycling or reactors added to their project. They could put that in at the impact assessment stage. It could go through the impact assessment stage, which happens at the first licensing. Then the second licensing is construction. It could go through construction where we have a public hearing, but the CNSC licensing hearings, all practice to date, the CNSC license hearings, the public hearings, a public intervener has 10 minutes to present. There was just a licensing hearing, the EA, the Environmental Assessment and Licensing hearing combined for the near-surface disposal facility at Chalk River, a very large waste disposal project. Northwatch, as one of many, many different interveners, we had 2 expert submissions and a general submission, and we had 10 minutes in total in that hearing to make those presentations, to have our opportunity to test the evidence. So that's the licensing process. It can go through the licensing process. We can get to the operating license, and there can be, at that point, very significant changes to the project from the project that we saw back at the impact assessment or environmental assessment stage. And we can even, after the license is issued, we can see major changes to the project and license amendment. And, all respect, I'm very glad that we have a licensing process that allows public intervention. I'm very glad that we have an impact assessment process that examines the range of issues and will include in that point an examination of seismic risk. But there are real limitations to this project, and I think Dr. Ottensmeyer's, persistence in promoting the idea of a fast breeder reactor being added at a centralized storage site for the purpose of reprocessing or recycling, I think is a good case study for us to look at the uncertainties that we will continue to face with respect to this project throughout the impact assessment process and the licensing process. So.